Brandt DXT grain carts have efficient unload speeds, large carrying capacities, unmatched durability, and reliable components that make sure your cart is working when you are. Lead the field with DXT grain carts from Brandt. Visit your local Brandt dealer for more information.
Welcome to The Truth About Ag. Welcome to the Truth About Ag podcast, distributed under the Real Agriculture Media Network and powered by the Heber Group of Companies. Remember to like, share, comment, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. So, before I get the introduction today, I finally get to say that our guest, his article got popped from the top of my list with Clarenbach and the Western producers' new land is going to drop 50% heaps. I've had about 7 text messages. Do you want to make a comment before I get into getting Ben to give us his background?
Fine. I think we could leave that for a good discussion in the middle of the podcast.
Okay, because I'm sick of getting text messages on it, so we got to touch on it today at least. But the real reason I got you on, Ben, you were my first MNP file, which I'm guessing you didn't know from back in the day, Mr. Gil Acey. So I won't date us too far, but I know it was 15 plus years ago. But obviously grew up in a farm near Spiritwood, which it looks like you are sitting at today. So give us your background, Ben, for anybody who might not know you.
Yeah, sure. I grew up here in Spiritwood, the exact opposite corner of Heber Group Farm, but ironically similar terrain. We have lots of rocks and potholes and bush. So we had cattle. We farmed about 1,500 acres when I was growing up, so pretty standard. And we had a pretty good machine shop business on the farm too. And my dad was kind of famous for fixing stuff, and we built a lot of our own equipment. So I was pretty keen on engineering when I left high school. So I went to Saskatchewan, went to Voss. So I have an ag engineering degree. It's not offered anymore, but it is. It was a thing back then.
I was gonna ask you what that actually meant, because I see it's agriculture and bioresource engineering, which I don't hear on a resume very often.
No, so the bioresource part is pretty neat too. But it was if you want to take it like the intersection between mechanical engineering and food science and agriculture all put into a program. So, and we studied a lot of soil science. We studied irrigation. We studied food processing technology, animal technology, livestock systems. So there's all that general agriculture stuff. And then you take all your normal physics and science and chemistry that you have to have as an engineer. So there's quite a few of my alumni friends that we graduated together. They ended up at places like Bordeaux or PAMI or John Deere, and then others went into places like water security or irrigation science, things like that. So you could kind of go down 2 roads. But yeah, it's a great degree, and I'm a proud U of S alum, so definitely still very connected there. But I did a couple of interesting stints working while I was in university. So I took a year and I lived in Europe, worked on a dairy farm there. That was really interesting. It was super eye-opening. Learned to speak German, and then traveled all over Europe. I've been to farms in Norway, Denmark. I wish I was a Nuffle scholar. That looks like a hell of a deal, but I did my own thing. So, and then came back and went on a custom combine crew in Kansas. So saw all the Midwest, how they farmed down there. Came back, did a couple more years in university, and then I worked at PAMI, and then I did an internship at Bordeaux, and kind of got the feeling like I wasn't wired the same as everybody else, and I decided to start my own company. So during my 4th year engineering, I launched a company, and then I basically was renovating the office during final exams, and I and I was in there at the end of April. So I was running my own company for 7 years and kind of got a bit of a reputation. That's how I got tied into M&P and others. And they helped me set up my company right from day one. And then I started getting recruited. So yeah, that's the venture capital side started to kick in. So I started a few different companies in that early phase. I wasn't married yet. Wasn't too worried about risk taking. So I could do all that stuff. Traveled quite a bit. Just continued to just say yes. All kinds of projects came across my desk and I just say, sure, let's do it. It was fun. I didn't have to sleep. I had lots of energy, so I got a lot accomplished at that stage. Took, some good, some bad, but it was fun. And then, there was an opportunity to work at a creation of a new venture capital fund. So I said, sure, let's do it. I was an engineer, but I'd learned quite a bit about the ups and downs of raising capital and how to get a company off the ground. So it seemed like a good fit. I did that for 3 years. That was 2005. So it's 20 years ago now. Then I actually spent 7 years working for the Meadow Lake Tribal Council. So the Meadow Lake Tribal Council is one of the most successful First Nations owned companies in Saskatchewan. And they're based out of Meadow Lake, so it's pretty close to my farm. And they asked me to be their CEO to run their group of companies. So they had 13 companies. Many of them are well known in Saskatchewan that you wouldn't realize are owned by them, but they had quite a successful group. And it just gave me an enormous amount of experience. I sat on all the boards of the companies that we owned, and through that time I was sitting on a few other boards as well. So really just very grateful. It was an incredibly interesting career, which twisted me all around, and then I got back into ag. And in 2015, I got invited to help with Morris. So I joined Morris Industries to figure out that situation a little bit. And that was a tough deal. It was probably the hardest project I had to work on. That one did not go the way I wanted it to. And, a lot of the hard lessons in ag machinery come out of that story. So I developed a lot of expertise in my first company that I started, we were doing consulting to shoreline ag manufacturers. So the Degelmans of the world and so on, they would hire us to do product development for them. So I've always had a strong interest in that. So coming back into ag was really timely. And through that time, that's also when I went through the succession with my parents and my grandparents who bought the farm from them. So when I got married and started having kids, and one of my kids grew up on the farm. So it was all intermingled through that career of, one day job executive, nighttime farmer. So yeah.
I love serial entrepreneurs that can't say no. It sounds familiar. Sounds familiar.
So I'm, this is a big year for me to turn 50. So this is kind of one of those big milestones. And I look back at it. It's been really fun. I've had lots of laughter, lots of tears, but it's really good. And now I'm really spending most of my time. I'll get back to the Raven CNH stuff in a minute, but really,
I'm going to take you there anyway. Don't worry, Ben.
Yeah. Really enjoy the work I do now. I sit on a number of boards, and I'm doing some consulting contract work. And then I've got a pretty neat job with a company called Callium that I'm helping them too. So, but yeah, been to farms all over the world, India, Australia, South America. I was thinking about it this morning. I was on a farm in Brazil, and we started driving, and we got to the middle of the farm an hour and a half later. It's called Citrasuco. They produce 35% of the world's orange juice in one farm, one spot.
I think we forget how small we really are.
Yeah, and still had the housing from the slaves from 400 years ago, right? Like 300, whatever. But I mean, they use it today for their not slaves. But it's amazing to me how those farms have survived 300 years.
So, so I guess I want to start. Let's go to the leadership side first, because obviously you've been on both ends of the spectrum. You've been CEO of private companies, then you've venture capital, and then the entrepreneurship side. So I guess how has your leadership style evolved? Because Heebs, I'm going to come at you after this too, because obviously you've kind of had the same trek, just different metrics. So give me a bit on how your leadership style evolves, Ben, when it comes to all this stuff.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm student of it still, I'd say, and I haven't got it all sorted. In the beginning, I was very farm kid proud. So when I say that, I mean, you grow up on a farm, you just do every task. There's no letting anyone down. Like you work until it's done, and you're not showing off. You're just getting stuff done. And when you're working in a company and you got a lot of people, you just assume that that's the way everybody else thinks, that you're gonna, if something needs to be done, it's not done yet, let's just go get it done. And I had some really smart coaches that taught me that what I was doing was creating passive defensive behavior with my team. So all I was doing was causing them to say, well, there's not much point in me trying to do this. Ben's just going to do it himself anyway. Or he knows what he wants. I don't know what the hell he wants, so I'll just let him do it. And I might have been irritated, but I didn't fire them or anything for that, right? I just kept doing that. And the pattern evolved. And I thought, well, look, we grew up on farms. That's the way we are. We help our neighbors. We go and jump in. We get things done. We're not offending anyone with that. We're not trying to show off with all of our amazing farmer skills. We just are born that way or raised that way. So with the coaching I got, I realized I had to start giving people the room to do it on their own, right? To be able to take accountability for their own leadership, rather than always stepping in to help them when I saw that it wasn't going perfect. Let them make mistakes. Let them develop their own capacity. So it wasn't for me, it was like I had one of those real moments where I had to pivot my behavior. I had to stop myself from doing what felt instinctual and start thinking about how my actions were affecting everybody else around me. And so
Heebs?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with them. I think the old adage, we say that the generation before us on farms had to work harder, right? And then our generation had to work smarter. And I would argue that in a lot of cases is just a function of generational businesses too, right? When you're a startup or you're a small farm, or I don't care what business you're starting, right? If you're under, I kind of live and die on this $1 million of revenue. If you're under $1 million of revenue, you might wear every hat from the janitor to the CEO, and every day of the week's a different day. And just like Ben said, like, you just get up in the morning, you do what you have to do to get that. And if you're overwhelmed, you just work 17 hours instead of 30, like that. That's just the only way to get out from under it. But then as you grow, both your business and yourself, so your business starts to grow over $1 million, and you start getting people. I mean, you can't hire good people and then just tell them exactly what to do all the time. So, but it's hard because you go from getting satisfaction out of getting things done. Like, that's what entrepreneurs do. That's what farmers do, right? We check stuff off at the end of the day, and we feel pretty good about getting it done. Whether that be, it's why fields are still an important thing to farmers. You start them and you finish them, right? But as you grow in your role as CEO or as manager, it's a tough transition to just setting outcomes and some guidelines, letting people do their thing, and realizing that you're probably just a big bottleneck. So when you get up in the morning, what decisions can you make to not slow everybody else down around you? And that's how you get more stuff done. But at that same time, it's the teeter-totter of making those decisions and then not feeling guilty that you're not helping enough, because you're moving into a kind of a different role where you're a decision maker and removing bottlenecks. You're not the doer. And you've spent your whole life up till then being the doer, right? So Shao, we've talked about this lots before. Like, I struggled tons with guilt when we were running 24 hours and I wasn't out there every hour, right? Or when we had shifts on the weekend and I couldn't be there. But at the same time, there's no way to pass on responsibility and accountability unless you're not there some of the time.
Well, and I think the big thing that we found was, and I didn't expect it, is as you move into a role where you start delegating and you're out of it, the big one to me is that you're now working on tasks that you might not have a completion at, right? Like, it might be a 5-year vision or a 10-year plan, and what you're doing today, you might not actually see fruition for a long time. Where back when you did every task, there was a start and an end, and you almost feel like you accomplished something. Well, now I got days where I leave here and I look back and I'm not sure what I did all day, to be fair.
You called me crazy when I told you that 3 years ago.
Yeah, well, let's go. Karma's a bitch, okay?
But it is. I think, and I mean, Ben, you can comment on this too, but I think I actually think that's why some businesses fail to grow. It isn't that the growth opportunity is not there. It's the transition into management out of the doer, hands-on phase. And specifically we see it, right? Agriculture, but I say trades or another business that I see a lot of that on. But I mean, even when I was spending time in San Francisco, like, those programmers are very start and end type people tasks. And then transitioning to just trusting other people to do stuff that you're pretty good at, right? That's why you are where you are. It's a different ballgame, right? And it's why we see companies that just have pay bands, and the only way to move up in the pay band is to turn into a manager. You might be moving someone out of exactly what they're good at into people management, and they might not be any good at people management.
Yeah, scaling is the issue. I mean, if you're really good at, in farmer case, if you can manage 2,500 acres pretty effectively, do all the tasks, maybe with hired help here and there, then you move to 25,000 acres. It's not just simply 10 of you, right? Who all think the same, who all do the exact same thing instinctually. You don't have to talk. It's all just synchronized. In the mix of that now is a whole new set of debates, because now it's I think we should do it this way. I think we should do it that way. And we're all going to fight about that instead of just knowing that there's a process that we've all agreed to, how decisions get made. And it's really cool. It's actually a real story, but I use it often when I'm talking to business teams. But the Navy SEALs Lone Survivor movie book, I don't know if you guys have seen that one, but there's a moment in that movie where they have like 4 minutes to make a decision, and they've got 8 of them, and they're all in a circle, and they all have to talk about what they think they should do, and they all have contradictory views, but in the end, the leader just makes a decision, right or wrong, and they all go with it. That's actually a Harvard business case now in terms of how to make decisions. You can just die through analysis if you keep debating it. You just have to eventually agree to a management structure where everybody's opinion matters, but there is somebody eventually that just makes a decision.
And you still got a hammer.
Yeah. And that's usually in scaling, that becomes the issue, is your governance, and how does everybody respect the decisions that are made, even if they're mistakes. In the mistake situations, there's just way too much, I told you so, you should have listened to me, and my idea would have worked, or whatever. And in effective teams, you learn to say, look, fail fast, fail cheap, let's move on. Let's learn from what happened. Everybody agreed to this system. We're all loyal to it, and this is how we're going to make progress.
Let's pause the truth about ag to go into financial acumen. We are facing high cost of production, volatile markets. Come work with Maverick Ag. Why would you come work with Maverick Ag, Gibbs?
I'm a big believer in doing what you're good at. And so if you don't want to spend time in the details specifically of your financial management and financial acumen, then you're better off to partner with somebody. Run your farm, grow your crop, raise your animals, whatever your specialty is, and have a high level knowledge of the financial side. but let somebody work with you to get into the details and let you know when debt service is getting close to offside, what your cash flow is doing, and what months you're going to be tight so that you can run the farm the way you want to be, as perfect as possible.
If you want someone to help you deal with the banking regime or look at your next equipment deal, reach out to Maverick Ag. That's maverickag.com. I think we just saw Succession on farms in like the last 30 seconds. Let's just cut this clip. We're probably good for the day.
Tie in the lack of decision and the arguing about decisions. Tie that to building up 40 years of equity and trying to trust somebody at that on top of just doing the time.
Oh, there's more. Okay. Yeah. So I think what actually makes me really interested, Ben, in your story is that, so when I left MNP and came here, as Christian said, 3 years ago, I didn't have these same views. And obviously I've changed kind of through the entrepreneurial course here, but the big one for me is that you've done that and then you've gone back. So yeah, how did you go back and forth and you know, and I mean, working at CNH and Raven, I mean, you would have had big teams there. So like, how did you manage the change in, you know, in your life cycle as you went, right?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely prefer small business. And it's way more fun. But, you know, when I ran the Metal League Tribal Council, I had 13 general managers and CEOs reporting to me, and we had thousands of people working there. So I did that for a long time. And then even Morris wasn't a small company, right? We had hundreds of people, and it was a lot of responsibility. But then, you know, so I go to Raven, which was a public company in the US, and they asked me to move there. So we literally sold our stuff and moved to South Dakota. And that was a big life decision. I had to pause farming because I couldn't commute. I don't have my pilot's license yet, so I couldn't do that. But it was one of those chance of a lifetime things. I mean, I hadn't worked in a public company, so I wanted to explore that. And I was really interested in all this cutting edge stuff. The autonomy, you know, in the midst of acquiring DOT, they were doing all this advanced sprayer tech. It was where everybody was talking at this point. And, you know, I knew the air seeder business. We knew how important precision tech is for running air seeders, but to see where it's all being used, all the different countries, how it's being used, that was just too interesting. So I joined them, and then wasn't even a few months later, it's like, surprise, we're getting acquired by CNH. And, well, that's an adventure too. So let's check it out.
Way to leave it at that.
So, you know, and I have to say, like, we all know in Saskatchewan, of course, the history of when New Holland bought FlexiCoil, and we saw how that impacted them. And CNH, unfortunately, they said this like right off the top as soon as they bought Raven. Don't worry, we're not going to screw this up, right? And so if that's okay, like, to acknowledge, but it's just a classic thing when a big company buys an innovative company that, you know, it's not going to be the same afterwards. But I enjoyed it. I still respect a lot of people there. I didn't always agree with the leadership, and shortly after I left, the leadership all changed. So I'm not saying I caused it, but I'm just saying, like, there were reasons. And I think they've got lots of opportunity in front of them. I wish them all the best, but there's definitely some things that I would do a little different. So, yeah. And then I came back to Canada. I think it's my home, and for my kids and for my family, it was the right move. So,
okay. Now that we open the door, I'm going to pull you into the equipment side, because obviously to be fair, that's where most of our audience wants us to play. So based on our metrics on the blogs we release, and obviously the uptake on your articles. So sure. Give us a bit of I guess in your articles, you made a whole bunch of comments on the industry in its totality, right? So let's start there. Just give me a roundabout on the machinery industry and what you're seeing today, and what some of the concerns that obviously a lot of our growers are going to face and that you've brought forth.
Yeah. Well, the storyline, I guess, and are you guys familiar with the boiling frog analogy? Do you know what that is? Where if you take a hot pot of water and drop a frog in it, they jump out. But if you put them in warm water and turn up the heat, they'll stay there till they die. So we're kind of like that here, in that, you know, we've had a pot of water as an industry for 50 years, and we're just sitting in that pot of water and it's warming up. Now it's hot. And I would say that if we weren't in it, would we jump into it right now? Like, there's a lot of things about it that I think are concerning. And don't get me wrong, there's lots of great things about it too. And that's not all negative, but the traditional model we've had is not much different than a lot of other ways that assets are bought and sold. You know, we, as farmers, will buy equipment. It's very expensive. We hope it does a great job and has improvements over the last equipment we bought, and that it'll hold value, and then we'll sell it, and we can calculate what it costs us to use that equipment. And that's been pretty consistent. I think there's lots of anecdotal commentary about people buy equipment off emotion, or they just like shiny new stuff, or they like the smell of fresh leather, or whatever. They'll buy equipment, and it doesn't make financial sense. However, more and more today, I think the farms are very careful about their financial decisions. They're not making emotional decisions like they used to. If grandpa has a lot of money, he wants to buy his son a brand new tractor, well, you know,
Good, let him go.
there's no ROI there. But at the end of the day, most of that equipment life cycle economics is what people think about. What I'm trying to shine a bit of a light on is it's in a lot of the issues you guys have talked about too, even on land succession. I mean, as farms have gotten bigger, there's been a traditional dependency on smaller farms to buy used equipment. And as those smaller farms disappear, if there's less of them, where is the secondary market? You know, what's going to happen with new equipment? So if you buy new equipment on trades every year, every 2 years, every 3 years, whatever your strategy is, you're depending on the dealer to give you this pretty confident answer on what the trade-in value is, because they believe they've got a customer waiting for that used equipment afterwards. And as I looked at the statistics, the numbers of where we're sitting today on new equipment sales versus used, I'm seeing a trend that shows there isn't that same match anymore. And the values of the equipment have gotten so big that the depreciation rates aren't necessarily appropriate.
The right numbers.
So either more depreciation has to be absorbed in the new equipment purchase, either by more utilization or just the fact that it's just more expensive, or there has to be a resurgence of new customers emerge somehow that are going to buy this used equipment, they're eager to pay $600,000-$700,000 for a combine or a tractor that's got 300-400 hours on it.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say we've seen any different, Christian? I mean, obviously we made the roll last year, but it was more based on the deal, the mud, everything else just made sense. But I mean, we've had the discussion that right now, if the next deal doesn't make sense, our plan is not we roll every year, we roll every 2 years. We roll when it's economically feasible and the deal makes sense, right? And I mean, the last couple of years, interest rates were part of the reason the deal didn't make sense. And then all of a sudden, JDF gets a little more aggressive because they, as you said, they're losing market in certain areas. So that's how they came around, right? Heebs, you got an opinion on that?
Yeah, I mean, so I don't know how many years I've been making the majority of the capital decisions, call it 15, 20, somewhere in there on capital, and we've only flipped twice. Now, the 2 times happen to be both in the last 5 years, but like we don't have a tie to flipping. It's a matter of, as you said, multi-unit discounts and interest rate buy-downs will cause us to flip or not flip. And the one thing I think too, Shout, that I like that he pointed out, right, is, as you mentioned, the word utilization, right? It's the number one way to drive depreciation to a favorable level on a farm of any type of size. Like you can't have 150 or 200 hours on tractor sprayers or combines anymore. Like if you do an ROI or any type of math on that, it does not work. And it's also why we saw lease programs from JD 5, 6, 7, more like 5 to 10 years ago.
You're underwater.
Clearly gone to the wayside because that utilization crew figure out that geez, $600 on a lease machine actually pencils really well. And now all of a sudden, they'll only give you $350, but it's because Deere did the math, right? The only way to have equipment somewhere near new is when you're going to utilize the living hell out of it. So big hours, 500, 600, 700, 800 hours on things. I realize on combines you won't get to 500, but 300 plus on combines, 600 plus on sprayers and 4-wheel drives. Otherwise, the math doesn't work in our spreadsheets unless somebody can do a spreadsheet better, right? But I completely agree with you. This used equipment market, I believe I think we're over the top of the mountain, right? We're seeing it already. We're seeing whether you look at current sales or the total data like you're looking at. We've been buying stuff out of auctions here this last 3 months already, and I told Evan the other day, like if we were to expand right now, I'm pretty sure the majority of our expansion equipment would come out of an auction. It wouldn't come on a mud because it would build us. The differentiation is too big now, right? Yeah. And then secondly, I think, as you said, as farms look more and more at the math, I use air seeders. You want a new air seeder set up right from front to back, and it's $800 to $1 million, and yet you can buy almost that exact same one, 8 years old, for $200,000.
And put a couple hundred in to fix it, and it's like new, right?
Yeah, some new boots. Because other than the specific carts with getting their sectional control and stuff updated, but toolbar technology really has not improved much in the last decade. Everyone will do their little touts, right? But in general, it hasn't. So as long as they can handle managing the people side of it, of having a second unit or just doing a little more maintenance, I'm the same. I think the gap has got way too big.
Well, and the interesting part is, and I speak in a lot of generalizations a lot of the time, so I probably don't give guys enough credit. Like when we talk LPM, we've always said, guys, they buy the shiny new equipment. We used to call it iron disease, call it whatever you want. But now some of the conversations, even in the last coaching that we had, Heaps, there's a couple farmers that are, let's call it mid-30s, that literally tell me they've got an LPM per acre that they're comfortable with, and they base their equipment deals on whether it fits into that LPM. So either there's got to be acres tied with it, or it's going to be a used piece. So guys are starting to have those realizations where I think if you go back a decade, it was, I'm a green guy, I buy green, and it's shiny, and I don't need to trade. But guess what? The dealer came out and he was nice, and he brought me supper in the field, and I think those conversations are starting to come.
Well, don't you think, Ben, too, so LPM, labor power machinery, the big issue right now, Evan, is Ben pointed it out. What is depreciation? Because, we've been looking at this for 20 years, right? Ben, you've probably been looking at it every bit as long as us, if not longer. And there has not been more depreciation volatility in equipment than there has been in the last 5 years. Like we went from normal, what I'd call it normal depreciation, 10 to 10, 11, 12%, to we had inflation on our last 4-wheel drive flip, right? But the inflation of the new price was worse than the inflation on our used price. But we actually there was no depreciation. We sold it for more than we paid for it and used it for 2 years. Never in my life, other than a 30-20, that someone has as a collector item, have I seen a piece of machinery go up after putting hours on it.
With a capital gain. When have we ever paid capital gains on equipment?
So that I think it helped with the confusion for producers. Because if you don't look at that with a long-term eyeglass to be like, nah, this is a one-off. I better hope I don't get stuck in this, right? And same reason why we push deals out to be 7 years long now on most of our flips is that we don't really care if we keep it for 1 year or 7 years, actually.
Yeah, it's the right way to look at it. I've listened to a lot of larger farms talk about the fact that they feel their buying power has always been one of their strongest tools, so they can use their large buying decision as leverage to get better discounts. The better discounts improve their capital utilization, gives them essentially a little bit of ROI that a smaller farmer wouldn't get. The dealers and the big OEMs are all falling over themselves all the time to win market share. Everybody's incentivized by market share. No one thinks about 3 years from now what's the consequences of these deals. Nobody thinks about. So even if you said today they're going to offer you something lucrative to get you to try to trade in, there's a consequence to that. Someone is owning that risk. Like JD Finance might own some of the risk on the floor plan of the used equipment, right? That's essentially the loan that the dealer gets to keep that stuff there for a year or two until it's sold. And if the valuation of that equipment changes during that period, someone has to eat the write down. So it's usually the dealer and the finance company start negotiating. They'll say, "Oh, I don't think this stuff's going to sell. It's too high priced. We miscalculated it on the trade in. But you guys, you drove the deal with your incentives and everything. I'm just the dealer, or you just forced me to take all this inventory." And so then the next thing comes in is, "Oh, well, if you take some stock of new, we'll extend the terms, you know." So if you take 5 more combines this year, well, I'll hit my quotas. And then no one says, "Well, yeah, but next year, now we're going to have all this used equipment and the 5 new ones to sell. How is this going to work?" Right? I think a lot of dealers learned their lessons in the last wave, but they're really sitting on a massive amount of these trades from the last 2 years that they don't know what to do. Well, the last Ritchie sale was an eye opener.
Yeah. And the big thing is, I mean, before a big farm traded 2 implements or 3 implements, now you've got a big farm trading 30 implements. So part of it is they've almost done it to themselves with some of the big mud deals they do, which I mean came with consolidation. It was going to come whether we allowed it to or not. So the big one is now when they take a deal with a big farm and, like you said, they buy market share, they're almost signing their own death warrant on the used equipment because they know what's coming back. And what we've seen is on some of those deals, the differences of, you know, what they're charging per hour for the cost versus what they're charging for the upgrade fees. I mean, on some of the market share buys, they're getting $100,000 better deal because they're buying off brand, where you might be a loyal Case or a loyal John Deere client and you're paying $100,000 more than the guy that they're trying to get into Deere, right? Which should piss off a lot of loyal customers, but that's the way it works.
Yeah. I think one thing too, I talked a little bit about it in the article, but you know, my context was US, Canada. So the fact is there's huge differences still. Canada, the consolidation and farm size changes have been accelerated here compared to the US. So we have kind of a different landscape, but I'd say if you look at farm machinery sales stats for the last 2 years, they've kind of just flattened. Like they're not going down anymore. The dip happened 2 years ago and now it's just kind of staying there. The US is still dipping. And it's just the makeup of the farms. Like the mud deals were being offered to farmers with 1,500, 2,000 acres. They're just single combine owners and they're getting these big discounts if they buy an 8R tractor, a planter, and a sprayer. Those people were the ones that were supposed to buy the used equipment. Yeah. And they're now out because they're locked into this brand new equipment that they thought was lucrative because they were getting into the John Deere club that they can talk to their bigger farm friends who were always in that club, and now they're in the club. And I think it was a seduction, and now here they are. Here we'd already figured out that if you're a larger farmer, multi-unit has been a thing for the last 15 years. Didn't matter which brand. And the market share between Deere, Case, and New Holland is all pretty spread out. You know, Claus is coming up the middle. They've got some interesting things going on, but it's not as John Deere dominant like the US is.
The interesting part was like your article actually came up as a discussion piece in one of the coach sessions last week, and we had a couple of US guys there, and honestly, by the time we were done the conversation, the US guys looked and said, "It feels like you guys are 2 years behind us." Like that's what they said. It says like we've been talking this stuff for the last couple of years on the oversupply, the drop in price. Like they literally came out and said that. It's like these are conversations we were having 24 months ago.
But yeah, your market dynamics, right? It wasn't just their equipment side. I mean, and corn and beans and COVID hit the numbers they did. The part of it is also that a lot of farms in the U.S. are heavily rented because of they're 3 generations ahead of us in a lot of areas, right? So their land rents skyrocketed, their machinery skyrocketed, tied to corn and beans because all the big companies still run on corn and beans, right? It's the biggest customer. And so the special crops, which really other than hard red spring wheat, Canada is just a country of special crops, right? Everything else we grow is kind of in the top 2, 3, 4, 5 producers in the world on a smaller basis. And so their fixed costs skyrocketed probably a full 24 months ahead of Canada, right? Like the I-State land during COVID was hitting $18,000 to $25,000 an acre, right? Land rents were, as a percentage of revenue, were outrageous, and the machinery just followed. And so I think we are 24 months behind, but it's just because of the corn bean lead. I mean, corn and beans lead prices. Corn and bean leads everything.
Yeah. Going to pull you away from the podcast here to go into Farmer Coach. We have opened up the registration for November. Brand new courses, the executive, the foundations. Heebs, why would you come to Farmer Coach?
Yeah, I think 2 quick points. The first one is just a baseline knowledge around farm management, right? From accrual statements and debt service ratios to human resource policies that we've seen work on operations and businesses kind of around the world. And secondly is just knowledgeable peers. It's not just what you learn, from the coach and being in the program. It's what you learn discussing with 10, 15, 20, 25 other operations and what's worked and not worked on their operations. And I think those 2 pieces are pretty invaluable.
With more than 90 producers having gone through the course, you have an online platform. It is probably one of your largest peer groups you can be a part of. So sign up, go to farmercoach.ca, and we'll see you in November.
Yeah. I was on a really beautiful farm in eastern Iowa, like 20 minutes from Waterloo, right? And 14,000 acres. It's pretty big for Iowa. Yeah. Third rented. So really quite a bit of owned land. The farm is spread out about 100 miles. So we have one farm 100 miles away from the rest. They've been a mud customer for 15 years. And they said they haven't done it for 2 years and they probably won't do it for a long time. They said there's just too much really good used equipment that does not make financial sense to buy new. It just doesn't. And they're in that beautiful Gozalak zone. They truck their grain to a barge. It's right there. And they don't have they don't have an elevator. They have their own elevator and they just sell direct, like they're big enough. And to hear them say, we don't see a business case for new equipment. So you're right, Kristen, like they have been on this for a while now. Here we've maintained our new equipment sales a little bit longer, but also our farms are bigger and we do put more hours on the equipment. And I think that's helped us to justify a little bit more of that, but it's going to impact us here just as quickly, I think, as we get through this.
Well, I got one more for him, Evan. So in your travels, Ben, have you seen, so I completely agree with your view. I can see us trending that way. My one area that I haven't quite figured out, right, is that as you transition more to a used fleet from a new fleet, right, I believe that long-term we need better collaboration between farms and the dealers on the mechanic side. Because if there's an area of labor in agriculture that's been hard to keep, plentiful, it's the mechanics. And I think part of it is, if you're working at a dealership, seeding might last 60 days from when the first farm starts to when the last farm ends, where, we say 20 days. And so it gets a little drug out. I think long-term, there's going to have to be partnerships between dealers and farms on mechanics to get more people in and have them tied to both sides, and have, farms sending their mechanic to get trained at JD Equipment School or Case Equipment School or New Holland Equipment School. But have you seen that anywhere in the world?
You're just playing into his other article on Just softball. Just throwing softballs here.
There you go.
Ability to repair our own equipment. Yeah. So, uh, so I completely agree with you. There's just one issue, which is that we've designed the equipment to make that hard right now.
Oh, yeah.
So if you look at places like Australia, okay, where they're ahead of us even on farm consolidation and scale and risk management, that's what happens is the dealers are so centralized, not everywhere. They're just, when they put a dealer in, it's big and they have a massive farm shop or workshop, and the workshop can house 25 combines at a time. And they can do a huge surge of maintenance during that crunch season. And then that equipment turns to planting or sprayers or whatever is the next phase. So they make it attractive for the workforce. So yes, you're in some remote community, but they've adapted with HR practices that say, hey, it's like almost the same thing we do with mind shift work. You're going to have a week off and you get to go live in the city for a week and have fun. And then you're going to come back out here and work your butt off for 2 weeks. And then we're going to make it so it's attractive for you for the next 10 years, right? We're going to train you. It's going to be an investment and you pay very well. Right? There's just a lot of things have had to be done there that we are sort of instinctively seeing coming down the pipe, but now we're realizing it's necessary. And the Australians too don't really take any shit from the OEMs. They just modify, right? If they don't see a path to this, they say, look, we are in a remote place. We can't get parts overnight. We're far away from all the world factories. We have to come up with our own solutions if you're not going to help us. So they just modify the OEM equipment to make it proper for their conditions. Here, I think that partnership with dealers is a fantastic idea because it further embeds the whole concept of them understanding the life cycle of the equipment and when is the right time. Like instead of this, I'm going to just go to a poker game with you and we're going to figure out who's going to take the risk on. It's like, we're in this together, guys. Like I need you as a dealer to survive and you need me as a farmer to be viable. So let's stop trying to just pretend like there's just going to be another farmer come along and you can take advantage of me this one time and everything's going to be, there's no consequences, right? I think the dealers that have developed those partnership relationships with their customers where they're doing a lot of value added services beyond equipment sales are starting to see that they become like a subcontractor to the farm, right? Not just a trader of merchandise. So that will require the OEMs to start to give that capability to the freedom / change the design a bit, right? I think if you said to the trucking industry that we're going to make it impossible for you to change transmissions in truck, they wouldn't buy trucks. Like it would just, why would we stop our operations so that you can come in and do proprietary transmission exchanges? Like nobody's gone that way in the trucking industry. Right? You go to any truck factory today, it's still frame rails, the cab, an engine, a transmission, and axles. They've modernized them. They put all kinds of new amazing technology in, but they're meant to be maintained. And we've evolved it. Like I was crawling over an X9 1000 last week. And I love turning wrenches, guys. Like I love it. It's on a my side thing. I cannot imagine where I would be in that process. Like the emissions controls on this thing take up half of the engine cavity now. And like, how do you get at everything to work on it? Like, so you do need this advanced training. You need the tools, you need the equipment you need cranes, you need everything to do this stuff now. It's not as simple as a socket set and some impact wrenches, Like,
well, and that was the interesting part is I actually had a farm story where they were looking at a deal and they weren't going to take the deal. And the dealer essentially told them that their old combines weren't going to get through the shop because they didn't have enough manpower to get them fixed. So either they did the deal to get the 2 combines that have been through the shop or they kept their old ones and good luck.
on your own. Yeah.
You're on your own.
Yeah. I don't think the capacity is there right now, to be honest, because most of the statistics, if you look at it, we have enormous capacity. Like the amount of air seeder capacity, the amount of sprayer capacity, the amount of combine capacity exceeds our land base because everybody wants it done in 20 days for that window for optimal yield, right? You can spread it out, but your yields will go down. Or you could do it with older equipment that breaks down and you don't, and then it rains and you missed your best day for planting or whatever, but you're still going to get a crop, but it won't, you'll have lost 10 or 15 bushels. That is unacceptable for large professional farms. So you overcapacity the equipment to get enough guarantee to hit your windows. But then that overcapacity of equipment needs an overcapacity of service and support as well and to maintain it, right? And the scale of a farm, if you're running 10 drills 24/7 and you got all your logistics figured out, tendering, fuel, support, agronomy, that's fine. But then if they're all the same and they all have a technical glitch and they all have to go down at the same time, you're expecting 10 people there within 8 hours to have it back up and running, right? And it doesn't matter if they sold 100 of them and they're all breaking down at the same time with all the regional customers. You're expecting yours first.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think some farms have to think also about, if you're going to get to that scale, probably you need to have a technologist, right? Somebody that's your head of all precision technology who's simply, they can jump on equipment and run it, but they're actually your own in-house expert and they can liaise with the dealer and get things fixed. But it's too much risk to put it 100% on the dealer right now.
And I'd say we floated that way a little bit, Heebs, with the way the team's set up now.
Yeah, I mean, we got a journeyman mechanic, and we have, one of our managers that could replace the head technology person at any of the dealerships, right? And then, and we kind of have backups too. Our other two managers that are in charge of, kind of people and projects are at least 50%, if not closer to 90% cross-trained on the two pieces. Because same thing, we run two shifts. And so, I don't want to get woke up 24 hours a day, and neither should they. So, our two different operator guys, one's in charge of people, one's in charge of technology, but they're both fairly well cross-trained. And our project and shop managers, one's in charge of like the head of maintenance, the other one's in charge of projects. But guess what? Project managers are usually really good with wrenches. And so they're 90% cross-trained. Because as a business, you can't, I don't care if it's the CEO or the mechanic or the tech guy or anybody, you can't have it stop just because one thing went wrong and only that person has the answer. It doesn't work, dude. Okay?
I learned a lot of lessons in all this when I worked for the Metal Lake Tribal Council, and one of our companies is North Sask Forest Products. It's a sawmill. And sawmills have a lot of things in common with farming. They produce a commodity and they're dependent on nature. The forest is supplying them their raw material. They get their ups and downs. They get forest fires. They get all the things, the risks. But when it comes to the production efficiency of a sawmill, there's nothing that I could say is more advanced than that in a manufacturing system than a sawmill. You're taking imperfect inputs and making perfect outputs. And you're doing it in incredibly high speed and precision using advanced machine learning that they have been using for 25 years. Not just like a new thing that everybody's talking about. I mean, lasers scanning the logs and then making an algorithmic decision over how to optimize the lumber output from that log and then adjust the machines in real time and in fractions of a second. Like the lumber is traveling at 90 miles an hour. It's really low, right? And it's scanning it, it's planing it, it's sorting it, it's drying everything. And agriculture has to figure out how you take imperfect, nature impacted inputs and make perfect outputs that the consumer wants, right? And how do you bridge the gap with it as much technology as possible to de-risk it?
Okay. I'm going to pull us out of the pessimistic view of equipment here for a little bit.
Sure.
So you've played with Raven, and obviously you played on the like you spoke a bit on the autonomy side and stuff. What excites you about what's coming in the tech side of equipment and that side of the business? I mean, you've probably seen a lot and probably can't talk about a lot, but give us a viewpoint of in your head where you see the most exciting part of ag tech and machinery.
Well, I think I can't avoid the autonomy discussion. I think it is very relevant. I think it is very exciting. The model I think that I would advocate for is the notion of kind of like the swarm idea, but not the micro robots that everybody started talking about a few years ago, but really take traditional machinery like we're used to operating today and say, I'm operating one machine and beside me is an autonomous machine running in tandem with me. I think there's a lot of merit in that because right now they're really aiming for Formula One where we're doing it all from a pit, some remote place, and everything's running.
It's not just your internet, Hebes.
No. Exactly. Yeah. That's why we're recording it a little bit separately.
See if he comes back here.
Yep. I'll just hang on until you come back.
We got you back?
We're back.
You back?
I think
Keep going.
Yeah. Go rural internet.
Oh, yeah.
So anyway, I think what I was saying was just we're trying to get it so that all the equipment can run driverless, like without an operator, using an internet connection, which we're just complaining about right now to make sure that equipment are stable. And I'm not convinced that there's enough reliable internet coverage over every square inch of farmland to make that work.
We're proving it. We're proving it.
Yeah. Even a Starlink connection or anything else, it's exciting, but it's still not reliable enough. And my view is that you got to have some in-field supervision and then double up what the operator can do with autonomy. So if an operator can now operate 3 or 4 machines instead of, you've reduced the labor issue and you've allowed to, you can take that savings and invest it in better wages for that high performer. Somebody who then wants to work on the farm and make a lot of money because they're a technology expert and a farming laborer, right?
Yeah.
That's the future, in my opinion. If I'm going to move out to, Nipawin or Kindersley and I'm going to live in that town while I'm working on the farm, but I still want to enjoy life and go to Mexico or whatever, well, I got to be making 6 figures. And that's what I would do if I worked in oil sands or whatever, right? I'd remote in, go do other things. There's a lot to that. And if you've got enough technology, you can get the education, you can focus on it.
Hebes, give me your opinion.
Yeah, I don't have to say much. I mean, I've always said that big equipment should be same thing. One operator runs 2 pieces, kind of like a mirrored piece beside you with an automatic shutoff button, right? If something goes wrong, you can kill it. I've also said on the big equipment, I don't see why we don't have a cab in the shop that we can have cameras pulling data all year while we're in these fields, use it for training all winter. And if one of my guys or girls needs to go to a birthday party or a funeral, I can just jump in the cab and run it from the shop. And I've got 2 operators out in the field that if for some reason I come unconnected, they can hit the kill switch close, right? And I think the pure autonomy should be on peripheral stuff, right? Like rock pickers, land rollers, the stuff where you've made the seeding map, you've got the boundaries, you know where you're going to run into a tree or a rock or a slough. I've always said that augers, I don't understand why we move augers anymore. Like bins don't really move. You could have your yard map, you could get the georeferences, you could set the auger up once and say, this is exactly where I want it. You could have a one power unit that's not a tractor that can hook on all these 16-inch augers or 13-inch augers. And when you pull away and the bin's full, you say, when I get back, I want you at bin 2, right? Like, I think that's where the pure autonomy comes in. And I completely agree with mirrored operations, or as I said, I still don't understand why the amount of pieces we have now that I don't have a cab in shop, running training for operators in the winter with exact video of our fields and that we can't remote in from that cab and run a piece of equipment with cameras in the field as a spare operator. I'm not saying full time, but you could shoot in there for 2 or 3 hours, right?
All right, we are pushing the hour here, which, don't get me wrong, Ben, I'd love to keep you on for a couple hours. But I got one final question before we let you go. And this one's going to be deep. So what advice would you give your younger self starting out in the engineering and the entrepreneurship side of agriculture?
What would I tell myself?
Of course. You back?
Yeah, I think so. I think I heard your question. You said, what would I tell myself if I could speak to my younger version when I was starting out on engineering?
You betcha. And entrepreneur.
So a few things. Probably should have parked some of the hubris earlier on and tagged into a little more humility early on. That would have been helpful. I think the one thing that I didn't do well in the beginning, but really learned later, I wouldn't say like recently, it happened midstream, was just the involvement of mentors. I started to figure out who my mentors should be, and because there are people that I think I could have used as mentors, but I wasn't compatible with them. And when I figured out who I was compatible with, that those mentors made a big impact on me. And they were usually older than me. So that was important. I should have engaged them a lot sooner. And then, I think probably the one tendency that I have is, man, I don't know how it's got its pros and cons. I tend to be a little bit too anti-conformist. So I should maybe just agree, accept the fact that the world is set up a certain way and that I'm not going to try to change it. And so there is a lot of things that I probably passed opportunities because I said, I'm never going to go that way. And I could have, and I would have probably had a great time, but I have no regrets. Like I've had wins and losses, but I've lived more life than most 90-year-olds already, and I'm pretty happy with all the adventures I've had. So I don't want to change it a lot. I just think there's a few pain points I could have avoided. I took some risks that I probably would say were too risky. I got into business with some people that I probably regret. So picking partners is another thing. Like I was too interested in the deal, and instead of being more careful about it, I jumped into bed with some of the wrong players.
Gotcha.
Oh, yeah.
All right. That's all we got for today. And I want to thank you, Ben, for jumping on with us. I mean, we obviously didn't get to the lad part, Hebe, so we'll have to leave that for the next version.
You know what, though, Evan? I think there is one thing, and Ben worded it right, that everybody should think about, because I think most people that listen to us or come to Farmer Coach, that the nonconformist point, right, is that I think when you're looking at issues or problems and you're trying to solve them, too many of us, when we're young, just say, hey, we're right, the world should change. But the world is like a great big company or a great big ship or whatever you call it, right? And it's going to change slower than you want. So I would urge most people, when you see those problems, right, you got to figure out what's the long-term game. How, if you could help fix this long-term, how would you fix it? That's okay. But if you want to move fast, you have to figure out how to change it within the rules it's already playing by. So whether that's the constitution of a not-for-profit, whether that's the bylaws of an RM, whether that's how your dealer works, if you can find a way to play within their rules but still accomplish what you want, things will move way faster, even though the long-term goal might be to make it more technically right? But arguing about what's right or wrong, which I've done too much in the past, just takes too long, right? And
Lots of it, guys, but
you have to switch.
This is the sign-off point. I'll say thank you. I'll wait till my stuff is all uploaded. And great talking to you.
All good. I love rural internet. Yeah. But again, if you like, share, subscribe, and comment, thank you, Ben. And that's the truth about ag.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us. The Truth About Ag podcast is a proud member of the Heber Group, which includes Heber Grain Ventures, Maverick Ag, and Farmer Coach. We appreciate the support. Lastly, please like, comment, share, subscribe, and ring the bell. And if you have questions for a future podcast, please leave in the comments below. Thanks for listening.